Hello everyone, I'm Carly, and if I had a choice between marrying a hot stranger and dying, I think I know what I would pick. And welcome to Read Receipts. In today's episode, you can run, but you can't hide, because we are going to be talking about the sequel to Phantasma, Enchantra by Kaylie Smith. Now, if you have been here for previous episodes, this episode is going to look a little bit different format-wise. In the past, we would typically in our book club episodes hop around from topic to topic under the assumption that you have already read the book. But in today's episode, if you have not read the book, you are in luck because I am going to walk us through the plot. You will still get quips and you will still get theories for the rest of the series, but this way, if you are someone like me who maybe wished that she didn't read this book, you can now know what happened in this book without having to read it, but still kind of getting the interesting information that you would want to learn having read Phantasma already. So with that being said, there will be spoilers for both this book and Phantasma, so keep that in mind as we go through. If that is something you care about, maybe come back later to this episode. Before we get into the specifics of what happened in the book, I'm going to talk first about my general thoughts. I'm also going to talk about the fact that I have my dog here, so if she moves and does stuff, please ignore. She just got spayed, so she's hanging out with me. And this is also her baby because she is experiencing a false pregnancy. And so there are these little unicorn toys that she has been treating like her little pups. And so this is one of them. This one's Mary. There's Mary, Chop, and Mel. So we have Mary today. Maybe have more in future videos. So for my general thoughts about the book, I ended up rating this book 3 stars. I actually was really surprised by the end of this book that when I went to Goodreads to give my own rating, that I saw that this book is rated pretty highly. Like it's above a 4-star average rating. And I just really didn't think this book worked. I will talk a little bit more about the specifics as they come up in the walkthrough, but I just felt like we were really trying to copy a lot of Phantasma and then put it in this book and hope that it worked. And in my opinion, it didn't. I didn't like the fact that we had these hide and seek games for really no reason. They were not nearly as intense. Like, sure, there were plenty of intense moments throughout, but I think the part about the sort of trials that we experienced in Phantasma was that the games themselves were interesting. Hide and seek, over and over again, just isn't fun. Even if they get caught, it's redundant and it's kind of boring. They just play truth or dare or whatever, two truths and a lie while they wait, and there's not a whole lot to it. So I felt like inserting a game into this book was really silly and irrelevant, and in my opinion felt like a lazy plot device that was almost like, well, we have to have a game because Phantasma had a game. And it's like, okay, well, we didn't need this. This didn't really work for me. On top of that, I felt like Genevieve, I might call her G at times because in my notes I wrote G because Genevieve is a really long name. So that might happen interchangeably. But I also didn't really like Genevieve as a main character. How it felt to me was that I really liked Ophelia, and I felt like Kaylie Smith as an author also really understood Ophelia and her motivations and stuff. I think that her having OCD was something that was really relatable, not just to me, but to Kaylie Smith herself, and helped her really flesh out this character and like all of her quirks and all of her depths and stuff. Whereas Genevieve, I feel like she only had an idea of, and it felt like her motivations weren't really as clear. I'll talk a little bit more about it as it comes up, but there are just some things that she does that I feel like she's just kind of like being stubborn for the sake of it, kind of. And as someone who is stubborn myself, I feel like there are times where I know what my motivation is as to why I don't want to do something. And so in my mind, it's like, okay, if she's a stubborn person, that's fine. But explain that. We're in her head, basically. Go ahead and give us that motivation. It felt like there was just not much depth to her. And I didn't really feel like that was fair to her because I just don't think that people are like that. So I felt like the writing for Genevieve as a character was not great. Like, I'll get into it a little bit more later, but the fact that she kept insisting on running away from her only shot at staying alive, even after it was told to her that, hey, this is kind of your only way out if you want to survive, if you want to live, you know, I don't know. We'll talk more about the specifics, but I was just like, okay, I'm trying to give you a lot of grace, girl, but I've run out. That being said, I did really enjoy the romance. I thought that the romance was pretty good, and I actually thought it was kind of funny that I had sort of opposite feelings about Enchantra and Phantasma, where I really loved Phantasma throughout like most of the book until the end. There were a few specific things about the end that I didn't really like, on top of the fact that I then found out that the rest of the series was not going to look like a typical fantasy series. I actually didn't love Enchantra throughout most of it, but I did really like the ending and how it wrapped up. So that's why I kind of landed on a 3, because I still really enjoy this world, but I did have some pretty big qualms. So, with that being said, I do really hope that when we get our next book, because I do think that we are getting a next book, I almost feel like we might be confirmed getting 2 more books. I do really hope that we're not going to continue this format of we're just going to keep switching to a new couple, giving someone a new person to have as a love interest, and going from there. Because at this point, I feel like we have enough questions that we need to get answered, Kaylie. So I think we're good now. I think we've done enough of the romances. Let's stick with these people. I'm really worried. I feel like there's a little bit of foreshadowing at the end to make us think like we could continue doing this, but I think it's enough slices. It's enough slices, Kaylie. Let's just focus on what we're doing in this world instead of switching topics and then dropping all the concerns that we had previously, okay? Personally, that is what I would like to do. Let's get into talking about the specifics here. So, this book starts pretty soon after the end of Phantasma. It was kind of referenced that Ophelia and Blackwell are going to like send Genevieve off on her own little trip so that way they have alone time at the house. And so she is in Rome. And part of the reason why she is there, beyond just the fact that Ophelia sent her there, is because she has found a specific picture of her mom with a man named Barrington Silver. And what was interesting about this picture was that they are both wearing little heart necklaces, which were the soul locks that Ophelia was wearing in her first book, and her mom previously in generations before were all wearing. And we find out by the end of Phantasma that that's because the soul of this unconfirmed vampire person, whatever, that Blackwell loved was in it, and then was passed down through their line, and eventually was Ophelia's soul. That whole thing happened, and there's still, again, lingering questions from Phantasma that we were trying to solve. And Genevieve's here like, hey, what is up with that soul lock? Why do we have it? Why is it that no other necromancers seem to have the same sort of token? But then she sees this picture of Barrington and is like, okay, well, let me go see if we can find out more answers from them. And she also kind of selfishly is wanting to reach out to these people because she is curious if they are also necromancers. She's curious about if there are other people in the family that feel a little similarly to her, where they are not gonna be part of that specific necromancer magic line, and how they feel. She's trying to find some connection there because she herself has felt a little bit on the outs of her own family because of that, specific role that Ophelia has with being a necromancer, and she is not. So she actually wrote a letter to Barrington as her mom, and Barrington responded back saying, I would love for you to come over to Italy where I live, but you do need to visit before the eve of the spring equinox. Of course, even though she's told that, she lollygags and doesn't listen and gets there on the eve of the spring equinox. And this is a little bit of where my troubles start with her, because I understand that she is young. We find out in this book that she starts the book at 21, I think. That's kind of disrespectful. Okay, girl, you were told to do one thing, and then because of your own personal things, you just kind of got too nervous and decided to push it until exactly when you were told not to do it. Don't love that, but whatever. I guess the plot of the book wouldn't start if it weren't for this. So she gets to this estate, and when she gets there at first, the wards are clearly keeping her out, but nevertheless, she persists. Eventually, she uses her specter powers to walk through the gates. She meets a really handsome man, and she's like, hey, I would like to come in. I would like to meet Barrington and talk to him. Hot man, aka our love interest, Rowan, tells her to go away. And so she then uses her specter powers more to enter the house. Completely just enter it, bypass this person. We find out that this is a huge deal because this game called Enchantra is going to start And by her entering the house on the eve of the spring equinox, she is going to now be forced to play an Enchantra. And there's a lot of reasons why this is a problem, but we're going to go ahead and kind of backtrack up a little bit more to learn about this family that she's being introduced to. So Barrington, the guy that's in the picture with her mom, he is actually the familiar of a devil named Nox. Now, I will be honest, I still, after reading this book, I still don't really feel like I fully understand what a familiar is and how exactly this works when it's another person. So it is what it is. He even gets asked, like, hey, why did you become a familiar? And he's kind of like, I was desperate. I wanted to be immortal, but I really regret it. Like, this was not the way to go. But it is what it is. His life is now tied to this devil, and he's forced to serve under him for the rest of their lives, I believe. And he has 7 kids that he had with a devil, and all of their kids have really weird names. They all end in Ington, like Barrington's name does, but they all basically go by the more short version of their name. And because he is technically, what is it? He's considered an other immortal paranormal being, but wraiths are considered an offspring of a demon and another paranormal being. So all of their kids, as a result of the nature of these two people, are wraiths. What are wraiths? Again, I don't feel like I fully understand it. They basically give the vibe of your typical bad boy powers that you see in a lot of these fantasy books because they got a lot of the shadows. There are specific different kinds of wraiths, which we'll get into more later, but it doesn't play a huge role into the plot and book itself, in my opinion. There are certain times where like specific powers get utilized, but I don't know. It's not really, in my opinion, delved into in the same way that a lot of other specific magic powers do. But anyway, so to get into all the kids, there are 7 kids. There's Rowan, which is our main man. Hot man. He has piercings, he has tattoos, and he's also very fashionable. Then we have Remy, who is his twin and looks almost the same except a little less put together and does not have piercings. And I also believe no tattoos, but I'm not 100% on that one. Then we have Seven, who is our sort of playful boy, typical comedic relief. I personally was picturing Emmett Cullen with a lollipop. He has a lollipop a lot of the time. We then also have Grave, and everyone doesn't like him. He is very serious. He's a big dude, and he's just kind of annoying. I think he's kind of boring, and people don't like that about him. I personally was picturing, this is super specific, but I was picturing this big dude from the video game The Quarry, who is played by the guy in My Name is Earl, I believe. And that's all I got for him. Then we have Coven. Again, we didn't really need these specific people, but we have Coven, and he is a man who likes snakes, and that is kind of the most of what we know about him, other than being a little bit of another comedic relief. Not as funny as Seven, but like they play off each other a little bit. And naturally, because of snakes, I was picturing Rob Roush. Then we have Ellen, the only girl in this group, and I was picturing Anya Taylor-Joy with a bob for her. Naturally, Ellen and G are gonna kind of become friends as the only 2 girls in this house. Not super close friends, but they still have a very good mutual respect, and I would say that she is one of the people that Genevieve becomes the closest to in this family. And then lastly, we have Wells, which, don't worry about him, it doesn't matter, he dies first. That's our cast of characters. Naturally, Barrington also does have a wife that he had these kids with. I don't even think we learn what her name is, to be honest. Maybe we do later. But to back up as to why this whole Enchantra game is happening is that while Barrington was together with his wife, at some point she became very sick with a disease called crimson rot, and Nox, the devil that Barrington is the familiar of, offered him a bargain that said that if his kids participated in this game and they called it the hunt, blah blah blah, his wife would be given a temporary fix for the illness. The problem is that Barrington, for some reason, even though he knows the devil's always got tricks, thought that this was a one-time thing. And so he was like, okay, my kids will have to do this hunt thing one time, but then my wife will get cured of her illness. And then that was not the case. And so basically, the rules are that every year, this hunt has to happen. And as a result of that happening, the wife will get a temporary fix, and that will last her for about a year until the next year when the hunt begins again. And so, anyone who steps into the house on the eve of the equinox is locked in as a player in the game. Normally, it's not a huge deal that this is part of the rules of it because it's just the family, but naturally, because Genevieve is here and now she happens to be a player. And the reason why this is a huge problem, and it's not just like, okay, well, I can do this, because Genevieve, of course, is like, well, I've done Phantasma. Why can't I do this? Like, I have experience in this specific type of thing. It's more than just a game that you can participate in. You either come out of the game as the winner or you die. Normally, it's not that big of a deal if you die, because how it works for these immortal wraiths is that they get killed, they then get sent to hell, and they basically just live in hell until the next year, and then they do this again. Whoever wins the game gets to stay on Earth and is not bound to hell. They can still visit hell, but they are allowed to live their lives freely, whereas everyone else is forced to live in hell. So basically, all that to say that if you're an immortal, it's not really that big of a deal. You might just get bound to hell, but you always have next year to potentially come back out. Because she is not immortal, she could actually die. Because, obviously. So, obviously, Barrington is the main one telling Genevieve all this stuff. Rowan's also there, kind of backing him up. And this is all sounding really bad. This is sounding like Genevieve is fucked. But luckily, there is one caveat that might work in their favor. And that is that if one of the siblings in the game is married and enters the hunt as a couple, and if they win, they will be freed from the games permanently. So, this is really exciting. This is a chance for Genevieve to maybe survive. So, the solution that Rowan and Barrington are proposing is that Genevieve marries Rowan and enters the game with him, and that way she has the best chance possible to survive. Rowan is the winner of the last 15 years of this game, so if she's going to be married to anyone, it's going to be him. He also feels a little bit like, well, I was the one that was talking to you before you came in, so you're in a way he's a little bit like, you're my problem. But yeah, this is sounding like, okay, obviously all of this is bad as far as playing a game. I might die and not make it out of this, but here's a way out. Here is a solid option of how to survive this whole situation and come out of it alive. So what does Genevieve do naturally? She runs away. This is where I get really annoyed, and I really was trying to think through this and think from her perspective and be like, okay, does this make sense? But I think what upsets me about this and is seen throughout the book is that in general, she is just running away from marriage when the alternative is death. Okay? Don't get me wrong. Obviously, marrying someone that you do not choose to marry is not great. But we also have to take into account the fact that the time period of when this book takes place, while never confirmed, is supposed to roughly be the 1800s or something. So marriage is also not exactly the same as what it used to be, or is not the same as what it is now, where we marry for love. Sure, that maybe can happen, but it is also very commonplace that people just get married for other reasons, other advantages. And she is very much just not wanting to do this because she's like, ew, I don't want to. This is crazy. And it's sure, I understand how, because it is from a different time period, also, there are other consequences to this. I don't know who this man is. I don't know what his ulterior motives are. But when you kind of live in this world where you live in the paranormal, and these are the consequences, these are the circumstances that are given to you, and this is your only way out, it starts to get a little frustrating, especially because, too, she never vocalizes any of this thought process of I don't trust these people, or I don't know what to make of this. There's no real deep thought process of why she doesn't want to get married. She genuinely is just this is crazy, and then leaves. And it's sure, to some degree this is crazy, but also in my opinion, considering the time period that we are talking about, it doesn't feel that crazy to kind of just marry a random stranger. Like, that is something that happened quite a bit, is that you would get into arranged marriages where you are just marrying for land or money or whatever, you know? Like, this doesn't seem that unbelievable. And even at the end, too, when she's recapping some of the stuff with, like, talking to Ophelia, and I'll talk about this again later, I have more notes on it. She's like, I can't believe you got married and didn't tell me. And I'm like, this also feels like it's not Ophelia's character. Like, Ophelia seems like someone who is very survival first and trying to get out of stuff. I mean, I guess not 100%. There are times where her stubbornness also leads her to, like, not use Blackwell to the best of her ability. But at least in those situations, it's like I can really see the emotion that is driving this illogical decision. Whereas this, again, just feels like I'm so mad that I didn't get to experience her wedding. And it's like, I don't think you would normally care if this is the time period that we're talking about. I don't know. And even then, like, I would also, if this was one of my relatives, I'd be like, well, I'm happy you did what you had to survive. I do not blame you. Like, sure, maybe an afterthought of this is it sucks that I didn't get to experience your wedding, but by all means, live. That is my number one priority. So yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about, where I feel like these characters, in my opinion, felt pretty multi-dimensional in Phantasma. But here in Enchantra, there's just not a lot of forethought, and it feels like Kaylie Smith really understood the character of Ophelia, but maybe didn't really understand the character of Genevieve. I don't know. At least she did not have the same sort of connection and understanding. I don't know. That's just, in my opinion, what it felt like. There's also a point eventually where she's like, why does it have to be Rowan that I have to marry? Which, what difference does it make at this point? You're the one that's upset about, like, getting married to any of these people. Why wouldn't you want to get married to the person who has won the last 15 years this game of death? Not to mention in the context of, like, part of also why they're doing this is that they need to pull off this ruse, right, to convince Knox that this is a real relationship. So that way he doesn't try to go after Genevieve himself in some way and lets her stay in the game and, again, potentially live and win this game. So it makes sense that if she is a mortal human, a specter, but still a mortal human, that she would meet Rowan of any of these siblings, who has won the last several years and therefore has been allowed on Earth, whereas everyone else has been in hell. So, like, truly, from a plot perspective, it can't be anyone else. It wouldn't make sense, and it wouldn't be believable to Knox if you married anyone else. But also, why wouldn't you want to marry him? You already admit at some point that he's the most beautiful man you've ever seen, and he's won. Like, I just feel like it just is insane to me that we're not considering some of these more logical things of, like, girl, why are you complaining? I feel like you're just complaining to complain at this point, which I guess is a common trait of Genevieve's throughout the book. But still, it's like, when it comes to your life, do you really still do this? I don't know. I don't know. In the end, basically, despite a lot of running away and, you know, hootenanny, whatever, they do get married. And the only people that are kind of nice to her throughout this whole process, well, at least in the beginning, are Ellen and Seven. But really, Grave is the most grumpy of all the siblings about this. He is the one who is very pessimistic, doesn't like this, is not supportive of the potential for Rowan to win and get out of the game. He doesn't trust it. Which, again, at this point in the beginning of the book, I was still kind of surprised that even though Ellen and Seven are nice to her, there is still very much an implication that no one is going to take it easy on them in the games, which I thought was kind of weird because in my mind, strategy-wise, I'm thinking, okay, if Rowan and Genevieve win and permanently leave the game, wouldn't that just be better? Because my assumption is that the games would still continue going forward, but now Rowan can't be a player, but there would still be a winner who would get to be on Earth. So that would mean one less person that you have to fight against. Like, in my mind, I'm almost like, guys, everyone get married and play this game, and then everyone eventually gets to be free to the games permanently because everyone just gets married and wins eventually. But I think it's fair that part of why they aren't thinking this way is that Knox is not he's literally a devil. So there's always, you know, a catch to these sort of things. Another fun fact that we learn about these games is that there's also a fan favorite. These are literally games that the people of hell watch, and so they get to vote on a fan favorite, and whoever wins fan favorite gets to choose a special item from Nox's trove of things. And so that's a fun thing. Seven mentions that he's had an eye on a pocket watch that is able to tell whoever holds it how much they have left and then he gets cut off. But I thought that this was kind of a weird thing to point out because what we learn later from Nox, because spoiler alert, Genevieve is going to be winning fan favorite and get to go to this trove, is that this is kind of contradictory because supposedly anytime someone wins fan favorite and enters the trove room, they get to choose what they want, but they are told to make a bargain with Nox to forget everything else about the trove other than the item that they pick and eventually get. So this is a little weird to me that this is a comment that's made. I'm a little unsure about how Seven remembers or knows about this pocket watch. If he would have had his memory wiped from previous times he would have entered the trove, but I don't know. Maybe it's hearsay that he's basing this on. We also get a little bit of background information on how Barrington knew Tessie. Tessie is Genevieve and Ophelia's mom. And it's not a whole lot of background information. He just basically says something about how he was doing a job for Nox and needed a necromancer and was in the area and therefore found Tessie. And it sounds like they stayed friends for a really long time. And he even knew their dad, Gabriel. Wait, yeah. I'm reading Throne of Glass. And so I was like, wait, is it Gabriel or Gavriel? But yeah, so he met him once too. It sounds like that they were kind of close, but then around the time that she entered Phantasma, they grew apart because I think he disagreed with the notion of her entering the games. But she's actually the one to break the news to everyone that Tessie has since died. And it's also interesting too that because all these kids, I say kids, but they're all immortal, they've all been alive for hundreds of years, they also are familiar with Tessie. So this is all like pretty shocking news that she's dead. And it's kind of crazy, like they might know in some ways Tessie better than even Genevieve has because they got to know her as just another peer and adult. Also, speaking of familiars, all of the siblings have familiars of their own, but they're normal and they picked animals and not other humans. So we also find out too that there are different types of wraiths, and I'm not going to get into all of them because again, it really doesn't play a whole lot into the plot other than specific times when like a specific magic power of theirs is needed. For instance, Ellen is the only light wraith, I believe is what it's called. And the main advantage that she has is that she has stronger healing capabilities. So there are a couple times where Genevieve might, get near death basically, and Ellen is the one to save her. I thought it was very cool though, not cool I guess, but interesting that Rowan is the most common type of wraith. Because, typically in these books, it's always like, oh, he's the most powerful being that they've ever seen and blah, blah, blah. So I did think that was interesting and different that was the case here. Rowan's wedding gift to Genevieve and basically her wedding band is this ring that he won once when he won fan favorite, and it heats up when someone with ill intent comes near her. So this kind of works out because once she puts it on, it proves that Rowan is safe and that she can trust him or build trust with him. But then it also very quickly soon after, she will run into situations where it does heat up and it's proven like, okay, these people are trying to kill me, are not good for me. So it'll be very helpful going forward to her in this game where she feels as though she can't trust anyone. So the game is getting ready to start. People are coming in ready to watch the games, although most of the time they watch them through mirrors. There are mirrors everywhere in this giant mansion, and that's how like most people in hell watch the show. But I think for like the first night they have a lot of people over. And so at one point Genevieve runs into this man named Cedric, and it's very scary. He's just kind of a random, like, I assume demon, devil, I don't know the specifics, and he tries to corner her and it's very scary. She handles it well for now, but he's not going away anytime soon. We also find out at some point that the heart necklace, I kind of talked about this already, but we just find out in more detail that the heart necklace specifically was a soul lock enchanted to collect and contain souls, which feels a little bit like a non-answer that we got because, yeah, I think we kind of already knew that. even if it wasn't 100% clear, that's basically what we found out at the end of Phantasma when we got that scene of what exactly the king did after he killed the one angel that Blackwell loved. He took her soul and put it in that locket. And it's like, okay, yeah. Yeah, so now I guess we all know that. But as the audience, we kind of already knew that. There is a masquerade going on, and it is announced that for the first time, the hunt has a team of 2. So even though this rule was created at some point, this is the first time it's actually worked out. In the past, I think it was just an attempt to lure someone into a relationship or into a marriage. But I think all the kids, again, don't trust Nox, so they weren't going to do that. Everyone is basically made to drink something that makes them all horny, which is exactly like that one scene from Phantasma where everyone drinks something and gets horny. And a lot of them are vampires and they're sucking each other's blood. And it's even referenced at one point that they're vampires. So I was just like, really? Okay. Again, we're just copying, pasting another thing exactly from the last book. This is not something that comes into play again for the rest of the book, but we meet a woman named Gwen and we find out that it's Seven's ex, and literally irrelevant for the rest of the book, but I'm kind of guessing that this is supposed to introduce to us that this is how the rule came to be about the couple winning, is that I'm sure that Nox was trying to convince or lure Seven into marrying Gwen, and that's ultimately why they're exes and not together, is because he feels as though they can't be. But I don't know, that's just me reading into that. Cedric, the creepy guy, comes up again, tries to corner G into a bathroom, and it is not going well, but luckily Rowan comes in to save her. And we don't find this out until later, but literally after this event, he goes and kills Cedric. He is so mad that he is trying to, like, put his hands on her in any way that he just outright kills him and then buries her. So it's not great for the sake of, I guess, relations with the Daemonica or whatever we find out, but not really relevant to this book, just a tidbit for the future, I think. Genevieve does reveal to Nox that she knows Blackwell. Also, there might be times where I call him Salem because in the book, as we kind of know from the end of Phantasma, everyone forgets that his true name is Blackwell and calls him Salem. So technically in the book, they all call him Salem, but he'll always be Blackwell to me. It's interesting, though. She brings that up to him, but I don't think there's any point that she brings this up to Rowan and that it's at least talked about. I mean, maybe they have a lot of downtime where they just talk, because what else are you supposed to do in a fucking game of hide and seek? But it's never really like a problem. It's just kind of crazy to me that there's not a scene for it. It seems like something that would really matter and could be of interest. Like, hey, I know the Prince of Devils. That's a big deal. But anyway, we get to our first round of hide and do nothing. Also, how these rounds work is that basically at the start of midnight, the round starts. One person is the hunter. They get to choose a game, but it's just kind of like an additional rule to basic hide and go seek. And then hide and seek takes place for 12 hours. They all have to try and survive the round for 12 hours. Then once it's noon, the game is over and that round is over and they get a break where they can sleep, eat, not get killed. And that pattern just keeps happening basically over and over again. So naturally, our first seeker is the only one that no one wants to be seeker, and that is Grave. Or I say seeker, it's also kind of hunter. So big Zoink Scoobs moment. Each seeker gets to choose a game, and guess what? They won't tell you what any of the games are until it's happening, even though they have hours and hours to prepare. This literally is true for almost the entire book that even Genevieve doesn't know, and they have so much downtime. I just think it's kind of annoying that this isn't something that they would talk about when it's pivotal to their lives. But anyway, the game is called Roaming Rooms, which just means that they have to change locations a few times each round, or during the round. But they have 10 minutes to hide, and Rowan is like, hey, I have something I need to go do, take care of Cedric's body. But wait for me in the foyer, and I'll be back. And so she listens to him. This is the one time that I give Genevieve, like, she did everything she could. I don't know what else she could have done. She waits in the foyer for him until there are 2 minutes left before then Grave gets the clear to hunt everyone. And he's still not there. So she naturally is like, this is where it makes sense of like, I don't really know this person now that I think about it. He could be setting me up. I don't really know why, but like, it's kind of like we're down to 2 minutes. What else am I supposed to do? I'm getting scared. I'm going to go ahead and hide. And so she goes outside because it's the only place that she's been, basically, and nearly gets hypothermia, but she's out there trying her best. So she's outside for nearly an hour. Grave eventually kind of finds her because so this is all happening in the winter and there's snow. So she left a clear trail of where she was walking, and so it was really easy to find her. But luckily, she kind of hides in another place and manages to escape him. And then after that, Rowan finds her and they go into his room, and he reveals a hidden passageway that leads to Graves' room. And so they hide in Graves' room because they couldn't walk through the front door of Graves' room because it's like booby trapped and stuff. I thought that was kind of funny. They eventually do have a run-in with Grave. Rowan, though, gets the hunting blade. There's a specific blade that they have to use to actually kill each other in order to successfully like get someone out of the game. You can't just do things that you would assume would kill someone. You have to specifically like stab someone through the heart. You can hurt people outside of that to like slow them down or whatever, but that's how you actually get them out. And so then they're kind of running away again. And this is when we kind of find out that there are also enchanted rooms to hide in, which makes sense because I was like, even if this house is massive, there's only so many places that you can look for someone. So the solution to this is that there are enchanted rooms that are much bigger on the inside and are like totally different landscapes, and they allow for a lot more places to hide, but they're also dangerous. There's kind of a lot to it here. So they're a lot more dangerous. There's more risk to actually being in the rooms. But also on top of that, the reason why you might want to enter the room beyond just more hiding opportunities is that there is potential to win a like immunity token, immunity idol, basically, where you get to have a round where you're not at risk of dying. Following the fight with Grave, they hide in a secret compartment in the library. Oh, look, another exact thing that happened in the last book. They, again, during the next switch, Grave finds them again, gets to a point where he tries to stab Genevieve. She moves out of the way just enough to not get pierced through the heart, but she still gets stabbed through her chest, which is crazy, and tacked to the wall behind her. She truly was just like, well, I am a paranormal being. I do heal faster as a result of this, so I'm just gonna take a risk and get stabbed. And because of her doing this, it takes him so long to get the blade back out of the wood that by the time he does that and tries again, she kind of runs out the clock and the round ends. But also, in the process of that, she like makes the blade and the entire room, I thought, disappear using her specter powers. It doesn't ever happen again. Like, it's just showing that she is for sure getting stronger, but we don't really hit on this, which is unfortunate because it sounds very interesting lore there of what's going on with her. Anyway, round ends. The only person that died was Wells. R.I.P. to Wells. Didn't know you enough to miss you, but goodbye. Ellen also helps heal her, and this is going to keep happening. Ellen keeps helping heal her because even though Genevieve is kind of capable of healing, being stabbed through the chest is a pretty big one. Genevieve tries looking through the library to see if she can find anything that can help with the cure to Crimson Rot, which is very nice of her because she doesn't know these people. But because she does this, she encounters another close call with Grave, and he is trying to kill her outside of the game because he, again, is really not trusting of Nox, does not trust this rule. He's just trying to eliminate her before it's a problem. Oh yes, this is where she makes the room disappear. So the first time she made the blade disappear, this time she makes the entire room disappear. And again, not really touched on. She doesn't even acknowledge it really. It's just like, oh, that's unexpected. That's not something I'm normally capable of. Moves on. So after this, Genevieve goes up to Rowan's room and they're just hanging out there until the next round. And Rowan is like, I think he's in the shower or something or whatever. I don't know if they have showers. But he's gone, and Genevieve's looking around and finds these letters that Rowan had started writing to his siblings. And I wrote down who he was writing to and what all they said. For one that was addressed to Ellen, he's confirming that he has made no progress on the cure to Crimson Rot. Everyone who knows about the cure seems to disappear or clams up, not wanting to get in Nox's way. He then has another letter to Remy that only says, I don't know how to prepare this rift. So that's the thing about Rowan and Remy. They don't get along. They talk about it a little bit, not a whole lot. I don't feel like it matters that much. He has another one to Grave that says, "Please, I am begging you to consider that there is a possibility of truth to the rumors. Consider Mother's feelings as well. You know she does not wish for this to continue either." I guess this is him showing that he's trying to convince Grave that there is a cure out there. But he's most honest with Ellen as far as the fact that it's not looking great. She then finds one of the letters that she wrote where she was pretending to be Tessie to Barrington in this group. She doesn't delve into it at that moment, and I hopefully wrote down when exactly she realizes this, but eventually she realizes or finds out that Barrington wasn't even the one who wrote back to her. It was Rowan. So this whole time they actually were the ones corresponding with each other. And he was actually kind of the reason why she ended up there, which also explains his additional guilt of feeling responsible for her. We get to round 2, and Remy, Rowan's twin, is the seeker. And the round is played under random starts. Exactly what it sounds like. Everyone is forced to start in a random spot, including Genevieve and Rowan. They are separated as a result of this. Genevieve ends up somewhere and then goes to Rowan's room in the hopes that that is like where they will meet up together. And she finds him there, noticing a tiny drop of blood beating at the piercing on his lip. And so at this point, I was kind of like, huh, random. And then there's a little bit more that happens, and it's like, okay, this is not Rowan. This is Remy. He does say, when he's still pretending to be Rowan, that Remy isn't going to hunt us down like Grave did. So it's a little bit like, okay, there's a little bit of comfort there in knowing that now. But eventually, at some point in the process, she realizes that this is not Rowan. This is Remy. And in an attempt to protect herself, which does work, she rips the lip ring through his flesh, which I think is crazy. I do feel like in some ways this book was a little more gory and horror-esque than Phantasma. Maybe not fully. I do think this sort of specific delving into fears that Phantasma had was very horror themed, but like, I don't know, it's a little brutal in these rounds as far as what they all do to each other. Her and Rowan do eventually find each other. They go to their secret room in the library that they keep going back to, and they will keep going back to, and they have a scuffle with Remy there because this room is not a secret, and I don't know why we keep pretending that it is. As a result, they have to leave, and they end up going into an enchanted room instead. It's kind of looking like a bit of a just normal park. There's a bridge, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but like basically they walk on the bridge, and as a result, they kind of realize this is where the token is for immunity. And so they're kind of trying to figure it out. They eventually see it in the water underneath, and they send in Rowan's familiar, which, by the way, has been here this whole time. I'm only mentioning her now because she hasn't really mattered much before this. But her name is Umbra, and she's a black or gray fox. And she goes into the water to try and get the token, but naturally there is a danger to trying to do these things, and so she gets attacked. And then Genevieve goes in to save her, which is really sweet, but she also gets attacked. And they do manage to both get out of it, but Genevieve especially has taken a lot of damage. And so as a result of this, Rowan goes to Ellen and is like, I will give you this token that we just did all this work for, but understandably, you gotta do what you gotta do. You can have this token if you agree to heal Genevieve. And so she does. And as a result of all this, Umbra this whole time has been a little bit like iffy on Genevieve, but now she loves her. And it's very cute. I kind of wish that Genevieve wasn't as like icy-ish to Umbra as the books go on, but for the most part they have a good relationship. She kind of just makes jokes about like, oh, why do you gotta love me? And it's like, come on, just lean into it, girl. That concludes round 2. I don't think anyone gets out in this round, so we still have all 6 siblings plus Genevieve. In the lead up to round 3, we find out that it's actually Genevieve's birthday. Her birthday is March 24th, which makes her an Aries, and that 100% tracks. We also find out, because one fun thing about this book, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but we do find out in the first book, Phantasma, that Genevieve has a diary that she keeps track of. And so at times she does have diary entries throughout the book. And she mentions that she has kissed 27 people to be exact. And that's a really funny piece of information. If you read Phantasma, there is a part towards the end there where basically Ophelia is presented with two versions of Genevieve, and one of the questions that she asks to figure out which one is the real Genevieve is, how many people have you kissed? And one of them says, like, I don't even remember. It's a high number, but I almost don't think it's as high as 27. She says, or no, one of them says, like, I don't know, like around 15 or something. And then the other one's like, ew, that's so many. I would never. I've only kissed 3 people. And Ophelia is like, something about both of these answers is not quite right. And so she figures out that neither of them are Genevieve. And so she gets through that round. So it's kind of funny that this has a little bit of elements of both, where it's like Genevieve A does know for a fact exactly how many people she's kissed, and B is not disgusted by a high number. Nice little callback there. We're starting to get a little bit more heat up in the romance between Genevieve and Rowan. They try to start to bone, but they get caught. It becomes a thing eventually that, like, Knox is like, hey, you guys need to spice things up for my audience. And so there's this whole, like, Genevieve kind of wants to do things, but she also, like, feels as though all of it's an act, but she's like, okay, well, if I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it in front of the people so that way I can win fan favorite. So they start to do it in a public spot, and then they get caught, and then they have to stop. And so this is going to keep happening to them, even when they're not necessarily trying to do it for attention. They all have dinner together, and we find out that as part of the Silver family tradition, I forgot to mention, their last names are Silver. The tradition for celebrating birthdays is that you get to put a knife in Barrington's back, which is so sad. Everyone gets to do it. It feels so sad because something that Barrington says at one point whenever, like, he's talking to Genevieve is that sometimes as a father or as a parent, the best thing that you can do is to let your kids feel what they need to feel, even if that includes hating you. And this feels like a prime example of, like, he is just, like, he looks like he's not enjoying himself at all throughout all of it, but he's also not stopping it because he feels like this is just something that has to be done. He acknowledges that he fucked up majorly by getting his kids into this game, but it's just, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. I feel a little bad for Barrington, but I also don't really blame the kids for how they feel because obviously they got the short end of the stick. It's all complicated. They also decide to all share a secret in order to determine who gets to go first. And it's really funny because everyone shares a secret about someone else in the family. And so these are all the secrets that get shared. Ellen was proposed to by Gareth Serpentine at the masquerade. Who is that? We don't know. It doesn't really matter. Coven has been boning Nessa Serpentine for a while now. Another Serpentine. Again, doesn't really matter. Grave stopped visiting their mother months ago, which is a very funny secret because up until this point, it's been painted as though Grave is the only one who cares about their mom and that she is crimson rot and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's very painted as though, like, he's kind of a mommy's boy. Remy stole Seven's stash of blood. They're both blood wraiths, so that kind of tracks. The way that they, like, instead of, like, eating food, the way that they get energy is by consuming blood. They're basically vampires, but I don't know. That's also why Seven has a popsicle, or not a popsicle, a lollipop in his mouth. They're blood lollipops, which is kind of funny. And then the secret that gets revealed for Rowan is that Rowan killed Cedric and Seven helped him with the body. And Rowan's the only one who shares a secret about himself in this whole thing. Everyone else is sharing each other's business. He admits this about himself, and so this is kind of a big deal. And this is where I think Barrington is like, that's not good. He's part of the Demonica, which is a prestigious secret society for demons. I'm calling it now. Book 3 title, Demonica. It's coming up. It's coming at us. So that's pretty much everything that happens up until round 3. Then round 3 starts, and the hunter this time is Seven, and the game that he chooses is solitary confinement, which means that you have to stay in one room the whole time. And because of the token that they gave Ellen, Ellen is immune this round. Because they can only stay in one place for a whole round, Rowan and Genevieve choose to go to one of the enchanted rooms, and the one that they enter is one that looks like a gloomy forest, but also has a bunch of looking glasses, which I interpret to just mean mirrors everywhere, and all of the reflections that they see of themselves look like them, but also aren't quite right. There'll always be something a little bit wrong. While they're there, we find out that Rowan was the one, again, who sent Genevieve the letter because he was hoping Ophelia would be the one to open it and help him with the crimson rot cure. So that kind of backfired for him in that regard. And so we kind of also, as a result, get a little bit of a Crimson Rot info dump. How the rot works is that it slowly infuses itself with a demon's blood so that their very life force is what kills them, rotting them from the inside out. And the temporary fix Nox gives his mom cleanses the rot out of her system, but over the course of the year, it would consume her once again. So that is also why they're trying to find a cure, because if they can find a cure for her, then she doesn't need this fix, and then they can stop doing the game and not have to be bound to this contract, because they're not getting anything out of it if she's cured. Naturally, they're in this room together. They've been talking about rotting blood, so they start boning. And they like just finish boning, and then Seven walks in. And this is the creepiest imagery, I think, from the whole book. It says that he's drenched in black blood and grinning from ear to ear because these people are fucking weird and they have to be demons. It's actually really sweet. So naturally, they start running away from Seven, as they should. And the whole time, as they're running away, Umbra sticks to Genevieve the whole time. It's so sweet. She is like so determined to protect her. Genevieve is climbing up a tree, and she ends up coming across a looking glass that's in one of the trees, and she notices that the reflection seems to look pretty closely to how she looks. All the other ones are a little bit distorted, but the thing that seems to be the most weird about this one is that it looks just like her, but it's not, her reflection is not mimicking her actions the way all the other ones do. So she thinks that's weird, and so she manages to do this, and she enters the mirror, and it seems like she's the only one that can go in, and she is taken to like an eerily quiet version of the same forest and sees her reflection out in the distance. But then once she gets closer and stuff, it flickers away to reveal like a spooky ghost underneath. So this is really, in my opinion, this is kind of the scariest scene. But whenever the spooky ghost thing appears and the body of hers goes away, she sees in its chest the token. So naturally she's like, okay, I think I need to go for this. And in fact, she says, but what a great birthday gift it would be to have a day off. And I'm like, girl, yes. And so she goes for the token. The creature claws at her face until she loses vision, which is scary, just in one of her eyes. And then she does get the token, and she runs back to the mirror. But when she makes it back to the real world, she finds out that the round is over. And she's talking to Rowan, and she's like, what's going on? Like, where's Seven? We need to run. And Rowan's like, how long do you think you were gone for? And she was like a few minutes. And he's like, the round's been over for a little while now. And apparently this whole time, like as soon as Genevieve went into the mirror, he's been freaking out. He actually then started to like try to hunt down Seven. Seven eventually left because he was like, this is too much. It's really sweet, actually. Rowan was like insistent on being there the whole time and waiting for her and trying to find her, and just wraps her in his arms and takes her away because that experience was traumatic as hell. I really love that scene and how it kind of played out, both in terms of like the intensity of it and also Rowan's response to everything when she gets out. Round 4, there's not a whole lot happens in the lead up to round 4 because they have the token, which means they got the day off. And so as a result, we get a little field trip to hell. They go to hell, they get to meet some fans, a lot of people are rooting for them. And there's a quick mention about how Nox isn't Nox's real name because devils don't use their real name. And Genevieve goes, right, Ophelia once mentioned that Salem used to be known by another name, his true name, but once Phantasma had come crashing down, everyone instantly forgot it. But not me. While they're in hell, they go to Nox's like estate in hell, and while they're there, he tells Genevieve that he would like to show her his trove since she's probably going to win fan favorite, so she's going to get like an early viewing and get to choose what she would like to get. They go see Rowan's mom. She's really sweet to Genevieve, but she's also like clearly sick. She's coughing up blood. She is not doing well, but overall the meeting goes really well. She also is not that phased at all at the fact that Rowan is married, which she could be, but if anyone's going to be upset about someone getting married, in my opinion, that woman's allowed to be upset. While they're there, Rowan got Genevieve a gift, which is a gold cuff that says the light is wherever you are. Again, very sweet. And then while they're there also, we see Seven arrive in hell because I don't remember if we even find out who is, oh, I think it's Coven. Coven is the one who's the seeker during this round. And so he kills Seven. And it's really sad because when he enters, he's like screaming in pain and his skin is like bubbling and steaming. And so that's basically what happens when any of these siblings get killed. They feel as though they're getting like burned alive and then they show up in hell and the pain can last for hours. So sure, they don't die, but it's not like they just appear in hell. They really feel it. So after a little bit, while they're kind of comforting Seven, Knox shows up and asks Rowan to come with him, and Genevieve stays with Seven, and it's a little sus. We're not really sure what's happening. But while he's gone, Genevieve is talking to Seven about love and asks if it's possible to love someone in such a short amount of time. And I really thought this quote was interesting. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but I did think that it was a good quote. And Seven says, "We're certainly capable of hating someone in a short period of time, on sight even. I don't see why love should be any different." Also, not really relevant to the plot, but maybe relevant for future books, Seven's type is sadistic and unavailable. Think about that for later. About an hour later, Knox returns, but without Rowan, and takes Genevieve to the Trove. Which I immediately was like, red flags, where's Rowan? But we kind of just glaze over that for now. He makes a bargain with her, as we talked before, that she can get whatever one item she wants, as long as she forgets everything from her time in the Trove, outside of that one item that she chooses. And she agrees. And so she goes into the Trove. They pass by a few different things. She notices that one of the things in there is the soul locket. Not clear exactly if it is specifically the same soul locket that she saw Barrington wear in that picture, but it is a soul locket, and she knows exactly what that is. So Knox is showing her various items. None of them particularly stand out to me as like something we need to take note of, but then he shows her that he has the cure to Crimson Rot, and this is where it kind of comes back to bite her that he told her about Blackwell, because he says, "Oh, your sister is playing with the Prince of Devils." And Genevieve is like, "Yeah, I told you that." And he's like, "Well, I had Wells go to Nocturnia. Nocturnia is someplace in hell." And to confirm that that was true, and the King of Devils was very excited that you were in my possession. The king offered him a bargain that he can't refuse, so he's going to do the same to her. If she agrees to convince Salem, Blackwell, to return to hell, Knox will let her choose the vial with the cure when she wins fan favorite. Genevieve ends up saying no because she thinks her and Rowan can find the cure on their own, but she is not really taking into account that she's going to forget all this because she's in the Trove, and so therefore she won't know. Also, an interesting thing to note here, well, two interesting things. One, Knox admits that he created Crimson Rot, so he just made it to as a way to like help keep all of Barrington's family like under his control. But also he mentions that, I don't know if he says every time, but he says that he's offered this cure before to the siblings when they've entered the Trove, and they've ultimately not chosen it, which I don't, maybe he's lying. This, in my opinion, occurs to me as something that's true. It's just interesting. I wonder what sort of bargains he was also offering to them at the time. My guess is that it was something that he was doing something similar where he was trying to get them into a bargain and it was something that they were not willing to get into. So that is ultimately why they haven't found the cure to Crimson Rot. But again, she ends up saying no because she's like, I'm going to remember that the cure exists and we are going to find it. We're going to figure it out ourselves. We don't need you. And he's like, okay. And so she returns from the Trove and she doesn't remember about the cure, as could be expected. Rowan finds her and says that they need to go now, but he has a carefully blank expression that puts her on edge. And I don't like it. It's very weird. The whole time I'm just like writing in my notebook, like, what are we doing? Why? What is going on? They go back to Enchantra and she's just kind of like, okay, so what was it that Knox was wanting to talk to you about? And he won't answer her for a while, which is further sketchy. Eventually he says that Wells went to Nocturnia for some information and he got it. And because she doesn't remember the conversation in the Trove, she's like, okay, was it bad information? And he's like, depends on who you ask. And she said, I'm asking you, dumbass. And he doesn't answer. And so he's just like, we should get some sleep. And then they do. And it's really weird. And we just, again, like, she's not glazing over it because she's trying to confront him, but also they just get past it. And it's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's clear at this point that Knox offered him something, said something. And this is where in my mind I was like, he must have told. You have anything to say, Agatha? This is where in my mind I think that Knox must have told Rowan that she is associated with Blackwell and that, like, he didn't know it, and maybe he's upset about it, and like maybe further information, maybe some lies here and there also surrounding it. But I really thought this is where it comes into play. But no, that's not what it is. We'll get to that when we get there. Round 5 is starting. Weird vibes are continuing. They basically aren't talking to each other, but they are still spending their time with each other, and Rowan is trying to avoid his siblings. So this is the sort of vibe that's happening. This leads Genevieve to wonder if he made a bargain with Knox, because he's tried to offer her several, which is definitely fair. I would also be thinking along those lines. The round starts and Ellen is the hunter and chooses birds and stones, which just means if any of the hiders find each other, they all have to stay together, which then makes it easier for the hunter to knock out more people. 2 birds, 1 stone type thing. Everyone just walks off when the round starts for their, like, they get like a 10-minute grace period where they can hide. And everyone just walks off, including Rowan, and he goes into the powder room and closes the door on Genevieve, which is very different from how all the other rounds have been going. It's always been like, we need to stick together, we need to find each other immediately, and now he's just out of the blue like, I'm gonna leave you behind and not gonna say anything to you. So naturally, she walks in and is like, what the fuck? And she sees that the mirror has been broken and Rowan punched it. It's like, okay, again, why? Weird. And this is also the point where when Genevieve asks about what the game is, because she doesn't understand, and despite all the downtime they have, they still haven't talked about all the game options. Rowan says, if you let me finish the tour a few days ago, you would know that. And it's like, okay, what is happening? What are we doing? So at this point, Genevieve speaks for all of us and is like, bro, what what went on in hell? Because you've been acting weird. And Rowan says, oh, this is, okay, I'm gonna like sort of act this part out. Rowan says, how? And she starts to say like, well, you don't seem to care about me. But then he cuts her off and is like, that's the problem. I do care about you. And she basically tells him to get out and hide on his own if he's going to be weird and cagey. And so he does. And like, that's it. But I just thought it was really funny the way he's like, I do care about you, and that's the problem. Classic dramatic line. She eventually runs into Ellen and almost dies, as we do. At least Ellen seemed really sad about killing her, so that was nice. But she calls for Rowan, and Rowan comes, and he snaps Ellen's neck. Eventually, they get to a little hiding spot. They're hanging out, and Rowan admits finally what's been going on, and that Knox offered him a deal and says, Wells warned me that Knox was looking for a way to eliminate you from the hunt, and that I should consider whatever his offer is carefully. Knox asked me to turn on you in exchange for my freedom. He can't kill you himself. It has to be one of us. I turn him down. I would never. I could never. I would never. I could never. And she goes, you barely even know me, Rowan. He offered you eternal freedom. Nothing is eternal, except for the fact that you've ruined me. All I've ever wanted was freedom from this wretched game, and I didn't even hesitate for a second to give it up. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was protecting you. I'm convinced you were made by the King of Devils himself to torture me for my sins, which is an interesting thing to say, I feel like, because as we know from Phantasma, in a way, Ophelia was actually made for Blackwell, in a way. So I couldn't help but be like, well, that's a weird thing to say. But then Genevieve says, you're such a self-centered bastard. I deserve to be the center of my own story. I was not made for you, which I really thought was almost Kaylie Smith being like, you're right, I fucked up a little bit. I went too far with making Ophelia not exactly, the center of her own story type thing. Because that is exactly how I felt about finding out Ophelia's backstory, or Ophelia's soul's backstory. But then he really presses on, what if I was made for you instead? Which is interesting. Maybe there's some truth to that, but I I need to know more about the specifics there if that is the case. They bone, or they start to bone. I don't remember exactly how far they get. I think they get pretty far. And then they are interrupted by Coven. And because of the rules of the round, he has to stay with them, which at that time is really funny. Eventually, Ellen does find them all, but she only kills Coven before the round ends. And so we are down to three siblings, four total: Ellen, Grave, Rowan, Genevieve. So in the lead up to round 6, Rowan gets up in the middle of the night to talk to Ellen. And while he's gone, Grave breaks into their room and tells Genevieve that he found out the loophole to Knox's rule about the married couple. Only one of the siblings could get out of serving him each year. So if Rowan gets free forever, then Knox won't be bound to let anyone else out of the game. They'll still be forced to play every year with no true winner and go back to serving him in hell. So this makes a lot more sense as to why Grave's been skeptical, and this makes sense as to why there would be a catch to this and why everyone else is also like, yeah, I'm not down for this, because basically, yeah, this is not working out in a way that would help anyone else. As a result of this, he tries to kill her, but don't worry, Rowan saves her. But everyone now knows about the loophole, so kind of awkward. Round 6 starts. Genevieve and Rowan are the hunters. They're the last ones to have not gotten to be hunters yet. And they play Ready or Not, which just doesn't allow for any lead time for people to hide, which doesn't really matter because Ellen walks right up to Rowan and he kills her. Apparently, they previously discussed this. I think this is what they got together to talk about when Rowan got up in the middle of the night, and she just kind of forfeits himself on him. And Knox is clearly upset because this is not at all entertaining for his viewers. They basically all agree to discontinue the round because, hey, they got someone out, so good enough for them, and to wait till tomorrow for a showdown with Grave. While they are waiting, it seems as though a plan is forming. They're all on the same page. Don't worry. We're all, as an audience, going to think that something bad is happening to Genevieve, but we're all good. Everyone's all on the same page. So the final round starts, and it is a showdown between Grave and Rowan/Genevieve. And it is confirmed that Genevieve won fan favorite, and so her prize ends up in her pocket. Knox is making an amendment to the rules of the round and the prize, and this is supposed to be a surprise to everyone. If they, Rowan and Grave, kill Genevieve within the hour, the siblings are free from Knox, effective immediately. The hunting blade will deliver her soul to Knox, and there is no enchantment binding her life to Rowan's anymore. And on top of that, he is giving Grave and Rowan their magic back to aid in them doing that. So as Knox is explaining all of this stuff, Rowan is just looking straight ahead, completely stone-faced. So it's feeling a little bit like, what's going on? Is this a surprise to us? It's feeling like it is. And so once he is done talking, Knox, Rowan turns to Genevieve with a grin on his face and says, I want you to know, for what it's worth, I am deeply sorry for what I'm about to do. And I'm like, again with the lover's betrayal. Again, another copy and paste from Phantasma. I know that, like, in some ways the Blackwell betrayal isn't like a full betrayal, but it feels enough like it because, you know, he gets there and it's not exactly, I mean, we didn't know he was going to be the Prince of Devils. And then also, like, I don't know, just everything else about it. It felt enough like a betrayal. And so I just was like, shut the fuck up. I'm so done with this book. A chase scene commences. They are chasing down Genevieve. They get out to, like, outside, and they play one last game of Two Truths and a Lie, which might sound confusing if this is truly your first time hearing about this book, because basically in the downtime when they are hiding and doing nothing, they play Two Truths and a Lie, but they play it a little bit differently where, it's still Two Truths and a Lie, but they somehow twist it. I don't remember. As Rowan is approaching Genevieve to kill her, he says, let's play one more game of Two Truths and a Lie. You tell me which one's the lie between the three. He says, you love me, you are mine, and finally, your plan is brilliant, but I don't think it's going to work. So it's like, oh, they came up with a plan, and the lie is that the plan will work. So it's like, okay, good. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to know that everything's going to be fine. So as this is happening, Knox realizes something fishy is going on. And Grave, one of Grave's powers, because Grave is actually the most powerful kind of wraith, is that he can freeze things, freeze time, freeze other people. And so he frees Nox with his powers, and while that's going on, Genevieve takes out the soul lock, which is the treasure that she won from the trove, and puts it around her neck, and then opens up the locket. And then this is when we also find out through her POV kind of that Grave this morning went to Nox to convince him that instead of just killing Genevieve, they should get to capture Genevieve's soul and also give them their magic back to help them better be able to pull all this off, because basically during all of these rounds they don't have their magic, including Genevieve. She doesn't have her specter magic until the clock runs out. That's kind of what's been going on. And so in the real time we get back to Genevieve and she says the last one's a lie, and then she takes the hunting blade that's in Rowan's hand and guides his hand to push the hunting blade into her heart. So she kills herself. That was the plan. And so Genevieve eventually wakes up and she's in her childhood home, and Blackwell is there. He's the only one there. And he asks what she remembers, and she's like, I remember being chased by crows. That was the hex that like Rowan put on whoever opened the letter to eventually get to Italy. And she's like, I remember going to Italy. I remember going up to the gates. I remember these berries. It must have been the berries. That's what happened to me, and that's how I'm here. So pretty much nothing is the answer. And Blackwell's like, lol, no, that has nothing to do with it. You died. So he explains to her that 4 days ago, 2 large men delivered her corpse, but they were able to revive her body because they had her soul in the soul locket. But in order to make the enchantment work where they could place her soul back into her body, he had to take all of her memories of a person that she loved. And so she's like, oh my God, who did I lose? And she's going through the checklist and she's like, well, I have Ophelia, I have my mom. And like, she's listing all these other people and she's like, I think everyone's here. What? Who am I missing? And so she wants to know more information about all this, but they're like, well, we don't want to overwhelm your mind, but we do have a letter for you. And so basically, Rowan has purposefully, he's not told Blackwell, Ophelia, and anyone exactly what happened so that way they can't tell her. But he is every week going to write her a letter explaining everything that happened so that way she can kind of get to know through that. And so every week she's like waiting for another letter to come. But despite all the letters, her memory never comes back and she still doesn't remember Rowan. And even as like he's saying all these things, it's kind of like, well, that's nice, but like, I don't know you. You know, she doesn't really feel a whole lot for it. She feels like a emptiness, but she doesn't have any connection to this information because she doesn't have her memories. I'm going to go ahead and just read the last letter because it is the only letter that we personally get to read and also has the most information. So he writes, Dear Genevieve, the final part of our story is where things fall apart. When Nox confirmed that the Prince of Devils was, in fact, connected to your sister, he became desperate to control you, and that made him vulnerable. You came up with a plan that was almost perfect. No one gives you nearly enough credit for how well you extract information from people and retain it. It was your visit to Nox's trove that gave you the idea. You wondered if we could leverage Nox's greed so he would offer us all the one thing he knew we wanted most, our freedom from the hunt. If we could convince him to try and keep your soul hostage, then he would want us to extract your soul rather than killing you. If we could place it in a soul lock and escape, your friend Salem could bring you back. Extracting your soul would fulfill the technicality of his bargain and we would all walk away. So we went to Grave, which was a risk, but at the end of the day, my brother is still my brother, and you're you. You convinced him we could pull this off, that he could plant the seed in Nox's head, ironically, thanks to the fact that he had nearly killed you so many times before, that if Nox agreed to set all of us free, it was time for him to make the right choice. When I spoke to Ellen of your plan, she agreed to forfeit when she realized returning to hell would mean she could get Wells and Seven to help remove our mother from Noxium. Nox would still be forced to complete his end of the bargain after the hunt was over and give our mother the fix, but at least she would no longer be in the Devil's Lair itself. And so the last person we needed to convince of my betrayal was Nox himself, just long enough for him to give Grave and me our magic. Taking your soul was a risky move. Salem nearly killed Grave and me for delivering you to your home in such a state. I think only your sister convinced him to spare our lives. But as well as our plan worked, Genevieve, there's one thing that went horribly wrong. Salem did exactly what you suspected he could, extracted your soul from the soul lock and returned it to your corporeal form. I don't think I've ever been in so much pain as I was in the minutes before your heart started beating again. But then it did, and you woke up and you did not recognize me. And that was nearly unbearable. It is a cruel thing to be looked on as a stranger by the one who knows you best. It is cruel that I was given a taste of what my eternity could have been filled with, your smile, your pleasure, your humor, only to have it ripped away from me in seconds. It is cruel that if your memories never came back, that it would only be fair to let you go. The problem is, Genevieve, that I can't, that I never will. And I know your memories have not come back, even with these letters, and that means they likely never will, but I will never stop searching for a way to get them back to you. I will search for the rest of my eternity if I must, because it belongs to you already. I pledge it to you in my vows. I understand if you do not feel the same, if you need to move on with your life. Our vows may have said eternally, but as I told you then, nothing is ever truly eternal, except my longing for you. Sincerely, Rowan. So I do kind of wonder as a result of this, like when exactly this plan formed, because part of it was like he was the one that had to convince Knox of his betrayal. And so I'm like, did that start when they went to hell? And that was part of why he was acting the way he was? I don't know. It's just a little like, I would love to know those details, but that never gets cleared up. But that gives us a little bit more insight as to like how this ending is playing out. So that's the last letter we get. And again, Genevieve doesn't remember anything, but she does get her gold bracelet back as well that he had given her with that last letter. We jump to 2 months later. She still doesn't remember, but she's out and about in town with Ophelia when a stranger holds open a door for her, and she is struck by how he's the most beautiful man that she's ever seen. It's Rowan. As they're just standing there looking at each other, because, like, as the audience, you're like, it has to be Rowan. They're just looking at each other, and then something hits the ground, and she looks down and sees that it's a thick silver ring, and it's the one that she was wearing during the games to warn her, heated up that he gave her. He asks if it's hers, and she says, I would never wear something like that. It's dot dot dot, and he fills in the gap and says hideous, and she's like, you think so too? And he doesn't say anything, but she notices that he looks disappointed, which, to be fair, he could have at least guessed all this much because she made it very clear that she thought it was ugly from the beginning. But I think he was hoping that she would still be drawn to it in some way. So eventually he's like, are you going to go inside? And she's like, no, I've changed my mind. And she starts to walk away. But then as she's walking away, she gets this like nagging feeling that she needs to go after him. And so she does. She calls back and is like, hey, I made a mistake. That ring is mine. And he looks relieved, and she takes it back and runs away, but then she doesn't put it on. She just holds on to it. She doesn't put it on for 2 weeks, and then she's kind of tossing and turning in the middle of the night, and she finally is like, I'm going to do it. She's just drawn to it. She puts it on her ring finger, and all of her memories come back, and she remembers Rowan. She does get one bonus memory, though, that's not hers and is from Rowan's POV, and it shows how Rowan got her memories back. And so what he did was that he went to the King of Devils, aka Blackwell's daddy, to make a bargain to get Genevieve's memories back. At first, the king asks him to convince Blackwell to visit daddy, but he says no, because he's like, clearly we're not doing that. And so instead, he offers to the king his immortality, binding his lifespan with hers. And it's kind of interesting to me that this is something that the king is willing to accept, especially with his history of not liking that Blackwell is with a mortal or with not a devil, or I don't know, with anyone, I think. But he does accept, and he makes one condition, because he asks for a token to put like the memories in, so naturally Rowan gives the ring, and he makes the condition that Rowan must deliver the ring to her personally, and Genevieve must choose to put it on herself. Once she does, their lifespans will be merged. It's kind of also during that time that I think his immortality like officially is gone, but he does notice that he still has his magic. So that is something to know for the future. He might be officially mortal, but he is still magical. Before Rowan leaves, though, a devil comes into his path and tells him to tell Blackwell that he's coming. And if you read Phantasma, you can bet your bottom dollar It's Sinclair. So Sinclair is coming back. My theory is about Sinclair. I made a TikTok post about it. Please go look at it because I have thoughts. I feel like Sinclair in the future is going to play a major role, assuming that we get to enjoy this series as like a fantasy series the way it should be. But we'll see. I am excited for Sinclair coming back, but that's the only taste we get of him for now. So she's racing around, realizing that her memories are back. She's like, I gotta find Rowan. She runs into Blackwell, and she kind of realizes as she's talking to him that she remembers more than just those things. She also remembers that she remembers her memories from inside Nox's trove. So therefore she remembers that there is a cure for Crimson Rot and that he has it and that it does exist. So that's exciting. And then she also kind of realizes, as she's also talking to Blackwell, that she remembers Blackwell's name, aka Blackwell, not Salem. So she's like, I'll tuck that one away for later. Don't know how that's going to come into play, but that is a little nerve-wracking. I think anyone knowing Blackwell's real name, even if it's Genevieve, is not really good. So I do fear that that is some negative foreshadowing in our future. Eventually, Genevieve and Rowan reunite, and it's very sweet, and they basically are now going to get to live happily ever after, minus, all the other shit that they have to figure out. So we get an epilogue, and we find out that Lucy from book 1 is living with Genevieve and Ophelia in Grim Manor. No updates on her life, if she's still I don't remember the name of the guy that she was. I thought it also was a guy that started with an L. Lionel? Lioness? I don't know. The guy that she was into and then she got cursed. No updates on him. But we find out that Grave and Seven are expected to come over to discuss figuring out the Crimson Rot cure. Now the time has started. The clock has started that they have less than a year to figure out how to cure Crimson Rot because they got one last fix from Nox as promised by the deal of the hunt. And so they have until then, basically, until that runs out to help their mom. So everyone in the family has been trying to figure out this cure except for Barrington, whom no one has talked to, no one has gotten a hold of. I assume this is because he is under, he's still Nox's familiar, so he's still doing his bidding. I would imagine that it's not exactly his choice, but it is a little sad that we haven't heard from him. During this whole thing, Grave and Seven walk in and Lucy is introduced to Grave and he just nods back. I don't know if this is meant to be a setup between the two of them. I hope not. Reading it again, I don't feel like it is, but I just don't really love Lucy coming back because I am not supportive of this trajectory of how we are doing this series. I don't want any more romances between people. I just want us to solve things. I don't know. I think Lucy's here to remind us of her and to set up her romance. I don't know if it's necessarily with Grave, but yeah. Anyway, we get a small nod that Jasper is still in Salem's life, so he is also probably going to appear again in future books, hopefully. Ophelia is supposedly mad that she came. Oh, yes, this is the part I wrote down because I was just I just don't believe this. Ophelia is supposedly mad that Genevieve came home from a vacation married and that she missed her wedding and she doesn't care if it was for survival. And that just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't line up. I don't believe it. Take it away. I'm just choosing not to believe these things because this book is bullshit. I'm sorry. We're getting back to the Crimson Rot stuff. They've heard that there was a reserve of the cure with a member of the Demonica, the organization that Cedric was in, and so Seven is working to become a pledge to enter. So, again, even before I got to that epilogue, my theory was that Demonica is going to be the name of our third book, and it is going to follow Seven attempting to get into the Demonica, which is unfortunate because that would also kind of lead us into, this whole thing of not focusing on the main characters that we originally were introduced to. But at least it's still more of story driven stuff from these previous books than this one was. I really was hoping that we would get more information in this one, and I did feel like we really didn't get much. I do feel like we were left with more to explore in this series going forward in this book, but I just don't know how much faith I have that we're going to really get to it, based on this book and how it went. But I don't know, maybe Kaylie felt as though she needed to have more to explore. And so that's what some of this book was accomplishing, was building something to pursue in other books. But yeah, that's basically how it ends. Rowan and Genevieve are living happily ever after in Grim Manor with Ophelia and Blackwell. And that's it. Thank you all for your patience because once again, this episode took a while to come out. Even though I finished this book a while ago, I think the further away I got from it, the more I was like, what am I going to say? I'm just going to, like, I didn't really love this book. It wasn't great. I did really like the ending. I liked that he gave up his immortality to be with her, and I liked the way that they got back together. But other than that, yeah, I didn't love the way that this book panned out. I really hope that the next book is more original and not so focused on like keeping the same things from the previous books. I think that the story itself is strong enough that we don't need to rely on these like not exactly gimmicks, but like, we we didn't just fall in love with Phantasma because of like the games and like things like that. Like that was a nice hook, but there was so much more to it and I don't think we need to be relying on these things. I'm hopeful for the series. I'm still going to be here with the future books, but yeah. So that was Enchantra. So for our next book up episode, I don't for sure know what book we're going to read. As you might notice by the date, Summer of Love is technically supposed to be starting. I might call this the first episode of Summer of Love because technically there was a romance in it. I didn't talk about it at all, but I did like it. I do have some pretty big plans for some things that I'm wanting to do during Summer of Love that are not necessarily specific to the book club episodes, but we will get to more of that in the future. I'm going to go ahead and say because I would say of the books that I've been thinking about reading for Summer of Love, this is the one that I feel most sure of that I want to read, and that is Every Step She Takes by Alison Cochrane. I've mentioned it before in previous episodes that I really love Alison Cochrane. I think she's a really underrated author. She writes really great sapphic romances, and this is her newest book, and I'm really excited to read it because this is going to pertain to my life very soon. I'm going on a hike trek thing in Europe, and I'm very unprepared for it. And I think that this is going to be a fun book to read in preparation for that. So, that is going to be our first book, sort of, first officially announced book of Summer of Love. And so, if you want to know more about what that book is about, I've got the back of the book summary here for you now. 35-year-old Seattleite Sadie Wells needs an escape. She's desperate to escape her monotonous routines, the family business that has consumed her entire life, and the unexpected gay panic that has her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. So when her injured sister offers Sadie her place on a tour along Portugal's Camino de Santiago, she decides this is the perfect chance to get away from it all. After 3 glasses of wine on the plane and some turbulence convinces Sadie she won't even survive the flight, she confesses all her secrets to her seatmate, Mal. The plane doesn't crash, and it turns out Mal is on her Camino tour. Worst of all, Sadie learns she is on a tour specifically for queer women and that her 200-mile trek will be a journey of self-discovery whether she wants it to be or not. Fascinated by the woman who drunkenly came out to her on the plane, Mal offers to help Sadie relive the queer adolescence she missed out on as they walk the Camino. As Sadie develops her newfound confidence, Mal grapples with a complicated loss and unexpected inheritance. But as their relationship blurs the lines between reality and practice, they both must decide if they will forever part at the end of the tour or chart a new course together. So, that is what it's about. I'm really excited. I love Alison Cochrane. I think she's great, and I haven't read this book yet, even though it's been out for quite a while. It came out almost a year ago. So, this is going to be the first book in the Summer of Love. I'm really excited that this is also going to be our first queer story on the podcast. So, we will be talking about that when I can talk about it, and hopefully it will be in the summer. And while we're here, I'm going to mention that I'm not 100% sure on how much of Summer of Love content we're going to be getting as far as book club episodes because I do have this tour that will be happening in the summer. So, sorry about that if that affects our Summer of Love. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of our hit podcast, Read Receipts. All of the content that you hear in this podcast is curated, recorded, and edited by us truly, with special thanks to the authors of the books that we cover and Pixabay for the music that we play. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you like to listen, and for more of our content in between shows, you can find us at the Read Receipts Pod on Instagram and TikTok. We read all of your comments and love all of your likes, so please, please, please follow along. Until our next read, bye!